Very short sermon for you all, which I will speak after his presentation. But I'm going to read you the key verse, which I'm going to speak today. So then I'm going to invite him. Matthew chapter 21, verses 28 to 31. But what do you think? A man had 2 sons, and he came to the first and said, "Son, go work today in the vineyard." And he answered, "I will not." But afterward he regretted it and went. The man came to the second and said the same thing. And he answered, "I will, sir." But he did not go. Which of the 2 did the will of his father? Okay? And I'm going to give you a question. I want that to percolate in your mind as you're listening to this mission presentation. And when I come back, I want you to answer that question. So the question is the same question Jesus posed. Which one of these sons you think obeyed the will or did the will of the Father? I'm going to give you option. It's an objective type question. Option A, the first son. Option B, the second son. Now I'm going to give you one more option. Option C, none of the above. Okay? Option A, the first son. Option B, the second son. Option C, none of the above. The reason I gave you an option C, which Jesus didn't give them, obviously, is that is one of the questions Jesus did not answer. He said, which of the sons did the will of his father? And normally, when Jesus asks a question and they will answer, then he will say, yes, good. Now, let me tell you something about it. Now, they said the answer. They said it was the first son who did the will of the Father because he said no, but he still did it anyway, right? But Jesus didn't say, good, because, well, obviously it is the answer, but there was something more to that answer. If you look at that scripture as a father or as a mother, even if you are not, you can imagine, you put yourself in, and I can put myself in their shoes. And as you know, I don't have 2 sons, but I have 2 daughters, right? So if I ask them to do something, I call one of them and say, can you go and do this? If she says to me, I don't care. Now, after half an hour, after 2 days, after 2 weeks, she might go and do it. Honestly, I don't care at that time. Because a true daughter is somebody who respects what I do, what I want, and who I am. Whether she does it or not is obviously important, but even as you know, as you are a father or a mother, or if you are going to become that, and the kind of daughter or son who you want is the daughter who says to you, yes, Dad, I'm happy to do so, like the second son in the story. But go and do what the first son did in the story. Does that make any sense? So I believe in order to answer that question, we need to introduce a third son, which is not in the story. It's funny, Emmanuel talked about imagination. And the interesting thing about the scripture, particularly what Jesus did was, he told things in stories. Because the power of the story is the story gives way to imagination. Jesus did not preach PowerPoint sermon, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4. He told stories. Stories involve imagination. To complete the story, the way I look at it, a true father or mother looks at it, we need to have an option D, which is a third son. Who is going to say that, Dad, I am so happy that you asked me, and I'm going to do it right away, and he is going to do it, right? Because in the story, the first son failed in theory he passed in practical. Back in India, we had all this, science exam. You have theory exam and you have practical exam. The first son was very rude to his father. I don't care. I don't want to do it. That's the theory part. He didn't do it. He failed the exam miserably. But then he went and did 100 out of 100 in his practical. Doesn't matter. You still failed the theory, right? And the second son was distinction in 99% in his theory. I will do, sir. Like with politeness, he said, but he miserably failed in practical. So in Christianity, especially as we speak about mission, right attitude is just as important as right action. Right? God is not just going to judge us based on our action. Actions are important. But what was the attitude behind that action? Which is what is going to be the evidence in the heavenly court when we are going to be judged. Because we can do right thing with the wrong attitude. And that is what happened to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all those people. They did the right thing, but with the wrong attitude. If we have the right attitude, the right action will flow spontaneously. We don't even have to worry about, what should I do? Is that the right thing? No. If you have the right attitude, the right action will follow. It will flow out of our own existence, our own being, right? So, the third son in that story, actually, the option D, is actually the storyteller himself. He is the real son. He is actually the hero of the story who is not there, who is invisible, right? He is the son who said to the father, I am going to do that. Jesus repeatedly used that phrase, I am sent by Father. I'm not here because I wanted to come here and save you guys. I am sent by my Father. And he is the son who obeyed his father and did accordingly. There is another story in the Bible where there is a father and two sons. You remember that story? Very popular story, right? We call it the story of the prodigal son. Actually, a theologian once said, it should be called the story of prodigal father, because that father was such a loving father. Now, if I ask you, which of those sons, like the prodigal son and his older son, which of those sons is the ideal son? The answer is not option A, not option B. It is kind of option C, none of the above, right? You don't want any of those sons, because even though the older son did everything his father said, there is a verse, and I'm not going to read all this, you go home and read. There is a verse in which he says, Father, I have been with you so long, but you did not give me anything to enjoy with my friends. To enjoy, to spend with my friends. That's what this older son who is inside the house says. Whereas the younger son who is outside the house is thinking about his dad. He is outside the house, but he is thinking about what is happening inside the house. Oh, my father, their servant, if I go, I will get this. And he is outside, but he is thinking about inside. But the son who is inside is thinking that I want this so that I could spend with my friends. Not with you. Dad, why don't we have a feast here? That's not what he's saying, right? So the point of the story, who is the true son? Who is the real son? The storyteller. Because if the true son in that story, the real son in that story, if you are the son, if Jesus is that son in the story of the prodigal father who is God himself, and he would say, Dad, my younger brother has gone from our house. You know what? I'm going to go and look for him. You don't even have to wait for him to come back. Let me go and look for him. Because that's what my dad wants. That's what the real son will be thinking. I want to please my dad. My dad is heartbroken. So it is my duty to go outside and find my younger son so that my father will be happy. Now that is the real son who is not in the story because he is the one who is telling the story. Now that is the son who is option D. And that is the son into his image we are called to be transformed in an everyday basis. So I want you to know that when God asks us to do something, an interesting thing is that he's not doing it for the sake of his job. And I'm pretty sure the father in the story could have asked that to some servants, right? Like, even though servants are not in the story. But God is asking us to do something for our sake, for us to be part of. I was asking, my daughters, I want them to have a bank account. I want them to open a bank account. Because really, they have more money than us. They get from grandparents and all that. They keep all this cash at home. They have more money than I have, but technically. He said, you have to open a bank account. Okay, they say, okay, we will open a bank account. Then they are waiting for me to go and open a bank account for them. And I said, no, I'm not going to do it. I want you to do the research. I want you to come up with which bank is the closest, which bank, gives the minimum monthly fee and all that. And they are so upset that I asked them to do. Now it is a couple months. They haven't done it yet. The point is why I'm asking them to do. Because I want them to learn in the process. It's not because I can do it for them. I want them because I love them. Right? And very often, God doesn't reveal his will to us because we have to have that attitude of love. We want to have pleasure in doing the will of God. Only then the will of God will be revealed to us. As a pastor, the question I get the most is this: Pastor, I don't know what is the will of God in this. Can you help me to dissect, or can we help me to discern the will of God? And the answer is very simple. You have to learn to love the will of God. Then the will of God will be revealed to you. Very often we know the will of God from a pastor, from a sermon or a prophet, and then we have to go, oh man, now I know it. Now I have to do it. So we do it like the first son in that story. We are not doing it graciously. So because of that, when I go to India, I have a lot of relatives, and they all ask me the question, Mathew, so what are you going to do? What are your plans? I don't talk to them. I don't talk to them any of it because they love me a lot, but they don't love my will. If I say, these are some of the stuff I want to do this sermon, I want to do this mission, they will roll their eyes because they don't appreciate what I will. They don't love what I will. So I don't want them to know what I will. I am not going to tell them what I will because they don't love what I will. And do you love the will of God? Before you even ask what is the will of God. So let us be the fourth option. Option D, the Son of God, the true Son, the third Son, the real Son in the story, who is looking forward to doing the will of God and do it just like that. So that is the message of the mission. And that's what Mr. T did, and that's what we are all called to do. And may the Lord bless you.